PFCs stands for perfluorochemicals. The word itself sounds toxic. Of course, most of us probably wouldn't give much thought to that. That is, until we're told that there are dangerous levels of it in our water supply, and it's no longer safe to drink out of our own taps. That's precisely what happened to residents in almost a dozen St. Paul suburbs. Let me give you a rundown of what happened. 3M, with headquarters here in the Twin Cities, started manufacturing these PFCs at its Cottage Grove plant in the 1950s. The multi-billion-dollar family of chemicals, which can be further broken down into PFOAs, PFOSs, and other PFOS-like substances, are made up of fluorine and carbon atoms, which normally do not attract each other. Once you put them together, they have a virtually unbreakable bond, which gave these chemicals the attributes of being able to repel water and grease, and which made them the heart of such world-famous brands such as Teflon, Stainmaster, Scotchgard, and Gore-Tex. It's what kept the food from sticking to pots and pans, what repelled stains on furniture and carpet, and made the rain roll off of raincoats. The chemicals from the manufacturing operations in Cottage Grove were then disposed of at 3M's Woodbury, Oakdale, and Washington County disposal sites and on location at Cottage Grove. Unfortunately, the same chemical bond which makes them virtually unbreakable in those common household products also keeps them from breaking down in the environment. Between 2004 and 2005, state health officials detected PFCs in the water supply of the city's Oakdale and Lake Elmo. Immediately, residents were instructed to stop drinking their own water. By 2006, health authorities reported 3M chemicals in the groundwater of 6 more East Metro suburbs. Residents of the East Metro began searching for answers. What damage had been done? Unfortunately, that answer still seems to be unclear today. I interviewed Bill Nelson, environmental spokesman for 3M, and I asked him if these chemicals were harmful.
In terms of about human health, there's been thousands of studies, certainly over 2,000. 3M is responsible for virtually half of those. And we know quite a bit about how these materials behave in the body, and especially from monitoring our employees who have quite a bit of these materials in them, more so than any of us or anyone in the general population. We just know quite a bit of data, and the fact that there have been no negative health effects attributable to exposure to these materials in people.
A 2007 study by a University of Minnesota epidemiologist reports otherwise. By examining the death certificates of 4,000 3M workers who had exposure to PFCs between 1943 and 1997, it was determined that there were elevated death rates from stroke and prostate cancer among those employees who were exposed. In fact, workers with the highest exposure were twice as likely to die of prostate cancer and stroke than those colleagues with little or no exposure. 3M officials called this difference a statistical anomaly. Bill Nelson told the Star Tribune that nothing in the study changes their conclusion that there are no adverse health effects from PFOAs. This study was similar to one conducted in 1993. That one found that those who worked for 10 years in the chemical division at the Cottage Grove plant had 3 times more prostate cancer deaths than those who worked for a decade in the non-chemical areas. Nelson told the Star Tribune that the 1993 research was a flawed study because it incorrectly characterized some of the exposed workers and that the research had been disproved by previous studies. Are you starting to see a pattern here? At this point, information on the effects in humans remains fairly limited. However, research on animals has reported that PFCs can cause decreased birth rate, increased postnatal mortality, delayed sexual maturity, tumors in the liver and pancreas, and a suppressed immune function.
The drinking water in the East Metro, specifically in these communities, is safe. It meets all government guidelines for safety, whether it's the federal or state guidelines.
So, let's talk about these guidelines and the MPCA for a moment. The MPCA, or Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, is responsible for monitoring and enforcing environmental quality regulations. That being said, you may wonder what their response to all this was. Well, local newspapers report that after 2 full years had passed, the agency had asked nothing more of 3M than to study the problem. And although those studies had shown the levels of PFCs thousands of times higher than the state health advisory would permit, the agency did not require 3M to take any serious action until they had received pressure to do so. In 2007, Senator John Marty of Roseville said that MPCA managers have downplayed the seriousness of the contamination and called the agency's actions outrageous. He said the agency should have demanded immediate cleanup rather than asking 3M to conduct successive studies that could consume years. Senator Katie Sieben shared similar opinions and called the MPCA's relaxed response unacceptable and said that it raises questions about the agency's relationship with 3M. KARE 11 News reported that one MPCA employee was bullied into keeping quiet about the issue.
I had only wanted to do my work and my science. Instead, MPCA management has harassed me, reprimanded me, and threatened to take my livelihood away for trying to do the right thing.
So, what should have happened? Well, no one has disputed the fact that 3M was responsible for the contamination of water that was consumed by over 67,000 people. Let's travel a moment to Ohio, where a similar case had unraveled. In 2004, traces of PFCs were found in Ohio's water supply, and the company DuPont was blamed because of their use of PFCs at a local manufacturing plant. By 2005, a judge had ordered DuPont to pay over $300 million to remove the PFCs from the water and to monitor the health of residents for any future problems which may occur as a result of the contamination. You may wonder where DuPont got the PFCs for use at their plants. Well, 3M, of course. The lawsuit against DuPont became the basis for a similar lawsuit against 3M. Lawyers from the DuPont case joined up with a team of Minnesota lawyers, and by 2006, over 1,000 residents had joined in on a class action lawsuit against 3M. But 3M lawyers remained firm that the PFCs in the East Metro water supply had harmed no one. They presented more than 1,500 studies that had shown that PFCs caused no harms to humans or animals at any dose. They claimed that a person in Woodbury would have to drink 500,000 glasses of water per day in order to match the dose found harmless in mice. By the time the lawsuit had gone to court, 3M had already spent over $56 million to clean out the chemicals in the water, and the MPCA said that their efforts had worked. They concluded that PFCs in the water supply were now at levels low enough that they could be consumed for a lifetime without any ill effects. In December of 2008, District Judge Mary Hannon threw out any arguments that the water contamination had affected people's health. By May of 2009, the class action lawsuit, which had once included over 1,000 people, had now dwindled down to a civil case involving 4 Washington County residents seeking punitive damages for negligence. Today, many residents of the East Metro continue to purchase and drink only bottled water. Although claims have been made that the water supply is safe, residents continue to be wary, knowing that their water remains tainted. Further studies have just been released within the past 6 months that show a strong correlation between PFCs in the blood and high levels of non-HDL, or bad cholesterol. Early last year, it was discovered that the PFC contamination had spread and was present in the fish of Lake Calhoun in Minneapolis. Just this month, it's been reported that a St. Louis park company, which was using chemicals produced by 3M, was responsible for this contamination. And just as the Environmental Protection Agency considers raising the guidelines for what levels of PFCs are actually safe in drinking water, the Star Tribune reports that 3M has been holding private meetings with university and federal scientists at a Minnesota lodge to discuss the latest findings about PFCs. The Tribune reports that state health officials were not invited to these meetings and says that it raises definite questions about undue industry influence. Why are there so many studies that contradict each other regarding the effects of PFCs on health? Why wasn't 3M held to the same standard that DuPont was just 4 states away? How widespread is the actual contamination, and what level of these chemicals is actually safe to consume?
From the moment that we have found that these materials are in the groundwater in East Metro, 3M has been committed to working with the state of Minnesota to get these materials out. And because we know their properties, that they don't break down on their own. And these materials do have the tendency to bioaccumulate, PFOS more than PFOA. But in either case, once these materials get inside you, they do build up to a certain level and your body excretes it, but relatively slowly.
Unfortunately, these questions continue to go unanswered today.